Hi, this is Sarah Lingra, and welcome to my home. I'm a piano teacher. I have a jazz combo. I play in a swing band, and I am always interested in sharing musical ideas, and I'm really excited about this. So this is my second attempt at this video because the first one, there was a bit of a spoiler, and I can't do that. So I'm going to redo this. Okay, so this video is about the Keith Jarrett Cologne 1975 album and concert. So Köln or Cologne, Germany. This album that was recorded at this particular concert was and is the most selling single solo piano album in history. So there's a really good reason to do this. So I'm going to give you the backstory and then add some little things. All of the information that I am giving you about the people who are involved in this, plus how I experienced it in case you want to experience it the same way, is listed in the description. Okay. So about a week ago, it's May 2025 now. Okay. So because the timeline, I think, matters. About a week ago, Priya Parker, who is the author of The Art of Gathering and has a video, a newsletter called Group Life, or a Substack thing called Group Life, sent out a voice newsletter about the film Köln 75. This was produced last year, 2025, and it is about the Köln 75 Keith Jarrett concert that, but it's not about the concert. It's about Vera Brandis, who was 18 in 1975 and ended up producing the concert that ended up being the single most selling solo piano album in history. And the backstory about how the concert happened and how it got put on is really interesting. And Parker's perspective is she's into gathering and getting people together. And so the film is kind of like a step-by-step how it was conceived. What did Brandis know and do before the concert went on, how the concert came together, and how all of the pieces fit. So I hear about this, and my jazz combo, I have an all-girl jazz combo, and the ages in my combo are 15, 16, to older than me. In fact, one of the women in the combo said 18 in 1975. I was 18 in 1975, which, I was 5. And so when you think about that age and that time frame, it's really interesting because there was no internet, no cell phones, no, texting. So to put on a concert and to do all of this stuff, and that time period is a lot different than what you would do today, even though a lot of the steps in terms of how you organize it are the same. So I'm excited about the film, and I'm telling everybody about it. And I was telling my son, who is a jazz double bassist in Norway. Okay. And of course, he's heard of Keith Jarrett. Keith Jarrett played with Art Blakey and the Jazz Messengers. He was with Miles Davis. He did all of these things. And so if you're studying jazz double bass, you're going to, of course, know who Keith Jarrett is. And Nikolai's comment was, well, I've heard of Keith Jarrett, of course. Have not listened to the album, and I feel like I should listen to the album before I watch the film. So I'm like, oh, yeah, I guess that's a good idea. So before I watched the film, spent the week listening to the album over and over and over again because it's really good. And I'm thinking, why didn't I know this? Okay. So listen to the album. And then I had planned on watching the film with friends because it's way more fun to watch things with friends, but I couldn't get everybody organized, and I want to see the film so that I can recommend it knowing that the film is actually good, because I have made recommendations of things that I didn't see all the way to the end. And then I'm like, oh, why didn't I wait until I saw it before I recommended it? So on Saturday morning, I watched the film. It's 2 hours. You can see it on Canopy, and Canopy is in the United States, Canopy is the app that's tied to the library. And the library has an app called Libby, which you can check out audiobooks and ebooks. And if you have a library card here, you can watch you can also use that card to connect to Canopy, which is a free streaming service that's associated with the library. I think you get a certain number of credits every month. So Köln 75 is on Canopy, but it's apparently also on Apple TV. So there are ways that if you type search for it, you can find it. So I watched it on Saturday morning. It's 2 hours, and it was so beautifully done. Full disclosure, Priya Parker mentions this. She watched it with her family. She has a 9-year-old daughter, and she said that there were a few scenes where she felt like she needed to cover the eyes of her kid because the time frame, 1975, a little bit of drug use and some adult behavior, and there is cigarette smoking. So just if you're planning on watching this with your kids, there's so much loveliness in the film. Just cover their eyes during the appropriate moments if that's your thing. Fortunately, my son's 25, so I don't have to do that anymore. So anyway, that links to everything that I'm talking about are in the description. So there's a link to the trailer of the film, plus links to Priya Parker. So I watched the movie. It's really good. In fact, I even watched the trailer, not the trailer, the credits, because the credits are popping up on screen to the beat of the music that's in the background, which is kind of cool. And I was curious, is it going to happen all the way to the end of the credits? And it did. So if you don't feel like watching credits, I've already done it for you. So there are little clips in the film there's a Duke Ellington quote. There's some Miles Davis stuff. There's some history of jazz in the film. And it's really interesting. And I can't do justice to it, so I'm not even going to attempt it. So watch the film and you'll get the Duke Ellington thing, which I would love to show all of my students because it's inspiring. So watch the film. Really moved by it. I'm jealous of people who haven't because they have something to look forward to, which I don't anymore since I've already seen it. Then I'm in the car and I'm listening to this audiobook. And the audiobook is by David Epstein. And it's called Inside the Box. And it's How Constraints Make Us Better. And David Epstein is a science and sports writer. He wrote the book Range, which I listened to, or I listened to it, I don't know, when it first came out. I don't remember how long ago that was. And I found his writing, the subjects that he was writing about was so compelling that I stayed in my car to listen to it. And the reason I bring this up, Range, is because he has a really good story, or he tells about Antonio Vivaldi and how he composed violin music and how the violin music was composed for girls in this orphanage in Venice. And there's a whole big story that goes along in there. And so the fact that Epstein is writing about music in his more recent book, the one that just came out, Inside the Box, How Constraints Make Us Better, it's germane. So I'm in the car on the same day that I had just watched the film, and wouldn't you know it, in Epstein's book, there's a section on Vera Brandeis, the 1975 concert, and all of the things that went into the concert and how that affected how Jarrett played. Now, the reason why I'm recording this twice is because I accidentally spoiled it. So I can't spoil it by saying anything more about Epstein because that'll tell you about the concert. And I want to let you experience that without having this preconception on what's going on. So here's the timeline so far. Priya Parker and the knowing about the film, listening to the album, watching the film, listening to David Epstein about constraints and Inside the Box and how that pertains to the film and Keith Jarrett's playing. And then once you understand what Epstein's talking about, when you listen to the Jarrett album again, it changes your perspective on the concert. And it makes it even more interesting and exciting. So I can't talk more about that, but it did make me think about constraints because maybe 10 or 15 years ago, New York City was doing a sort of pianos in the park thing. And I went to New York City with the idea of playing on a couple of the pianos that they had 50 pianos. It was, I think, in a program called Sing for Hope, and they had artists decorate these 50 pianos and they spread them throughout all of New York City. And so I was living overseas at the time, and on the way back to the United States to spend the summer with my family, I flew through New York City, and I went to New York because I wanted to play on one of these pianos. The piano that I played on was in Central Park, and this is in June, and humid, very humid. And, it's a public piano. It had already been out there for a couple of weeks, and pianos don't love humidity, and they also don't love being played by a lot of random people in public spaces when they're not being maintained on a regular basis. And so I go to the piano, and down the path that the piano is on, they're having a lumberjack competition. Who doesn't love a good lumberjack competition? So lots of traffic going in and out. And I open up the piano and I play all the keys, because if you're going to be playing on a strange piano, before you even touch it, you want to make sure that things are working, or you want to know it's working. And so on this idea of constraints, piano was rough. It wasn't in tune. Some of the keys, when you depressed them, wouldn't budge. Other ones, when you played down on them, you pushed them down and you had to hook it with your thumb and pull the key back up so that it would repeat. Again, not in tune. And so as I go through the thing, I'm like, what am I going to be able to play? Right. And it turns out that there were enough working keys on the piano that I had 3 bass notes and a D blues scale. Okay. So on that tired artistic piano in Central Park, I was able to improvise for half an hour on a D blues, because that's the whole key set that I had in order to do this. So it got me thinking, and this will probably be a video or a lesson at some point in the future, that when you have constraints, so the listening to the Epstein book was even more interesting after the Vera Brandes part, because he was talking about Johann Sebastian Bach and how Bach was continuously giving himself constraints when he was composing, because having those constraints meant that you have this really great opportunity for being creative. So when I teach improvisation, and I've been doing this, I realized that if you give your students, you can play anything, then playing anything is concerning. Like it's too much for a student to do. So when I have students learning how to improvise, instead of using all the notes of a scale, you can use 2. The 2 that I often start on are the 1 and the 5. So if you're in the key of C, it's the C and the G. And so working with constraints, and it kind of got me thinking about music in general. Like when you think about all of these songs that use a 4-chord pattern, because I do a lot of teaching with chords and chord progressions, rather than think, oh, it's the same 4 chords, it's got me thinking, wow, you've got 4 chords and you've got a scale. What crazy things can you do using those 2 things as a constraint to make all of this better and to improvise more? So I have jam sessions on Wednesdays and rehearsals on Saturdays, and I teach privately here, and I can just see how interesting this is going to be to more formally put the idea of how to improvise in a concrete format that's going to be a little bit more accessible for my students and make them less freaked out about having to create things on the spot. I can also see using that in composition. What are the constraints before you start writing or composing, so that you can be really creative, but you've limited all of the factors. And I think music is like that, right? It's having constraints. You have a scale and a key, and you have chord patterns and all of this stuff. So it's always written in some form of constraint, and understanding that makes it a lot better. So in the notes underneath, I listed, here's the timeline. So I got the film recommendation by Priya Parker, and I used a lot of her stuff when I'm putting together gatherings and recitals and that kind of thing. Then I listened to the album, the Köln 75 by Keith Jarrett. Then I watched the film of the same name, which was super cool and inspiring. Then I listened to Inside the Box by David Epstein about Vera Brandes and Keith Jarrett and the piano and all of the things that go along with it. And then I listen to the album again, and I will be listening to the album over and over and over again because I can totally see why people got obsessed with it. And then using the idea of constraints and universal design and all of that and the kinds of things that I do with teaching is very cool. So this was such a fun thing that I'm going to be continuously sharing with all of my students and everybody that I had to share it with you too. So again, this is Sarah Lingra. Welcome to my house. This is just thoughts on music and the piano, and I hope you get something out of it. Thank you.